We're having some fun with this. Couple weeks now in our third round of retailer questions for Dan, and more importantly, this isn't questions, this is answers, the Q&A part. So, Dan, take us away.
It's funny. We started this a few weeks ago, and yesterday when I went to pull a question for the podcast, there was lots to choose from.
Nice.
So I took the first one that came in after last week's podcast. And it was from Kathy in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Hi Dan, she writes, on one of your recent podcasts, you were talking about vendor scorecards and the key measurables for vendors. What are the top 3 measures I should be reviewing with them? Also, can you share your vendor scorecard with me? So, yes, I did share the vendor scorecard.
Okay.
Happy to share it with anyone. Send an email to dan@thewealthyretailer.com and I'll give you a copy of what I feel like is a pretty good scorecard that we curated together with one of our retail superstars, Bob Zeckel with Cloud9 Pajamas.
Awesome. Yep.
So let's talk about the scorecard. Let's start by really defining what the scorecard is. The scorecard in your business is a quantifiable document used to objectively measure a vendor's performance as well as their current or immediate ability to aid in the growth of your store and the realization of your vision. We also use that scorecard to compare vendor against vendor. So I say against like it's a negative, but I lay all of my vendor scorecards on the table, and the exercise that I go through often uncovers hidden gems in your vendor lineup. The 2 most critical things, Kathy asked for 3, and I gave her the actual scorecard and all of them. But there's not really 3 that I believe are ultra critical. There are 2. They are the 2 metrics, cash margin and efficiency or categorical sell-through. So we're going to talk about sell-through a little differently than what you might learn in Retail 101 school. So let's start with cash margin. Cash margin is the measure of sales and cost of purchase. Too often we measure performance using cost of goods sold, which simply measures the cost of a single item sold rather than our entire investment at the vendor and category level. Cash margin are the dollars generated from sales to operate your store. It takes into account what you bought from the vendor, not what you sold from what you bought, if you can dig through that a little bit. Cash margin are the dollars that we generate beyond the sale to operate our store. So a quick example, if I have a $100 sale and I bought $80 worth of entire categorical inventory from that vendor, my cost of purchase is 80%. I'm only catering or giving $20 back to operate my business. This is a true cash measure instead of the age-old cost of goods sold, which really only reflects the cost of a single item, not your entire investment. So a bit misleading when we start to think about this. So cash margin, number 1 most important metric at the categorical and vendor level, or vendor and categorical level. Number 2 is what we call efficiency or categorical sell-through. Efficiency is the measure of how quickly we turn inventory, your investment, entire investment with that vendor, back into cash. And quite simply, your seasonal or annual net sales divided by your total purchases with that vendor. Your target should be 75 to 85%. And thinking about sell-through, it's not, how well I sell through a line of t-shirts, how well I sell through an item. It's looking at the investment that you made with the vendor in its entirety and says, how quickly was I able to turn that back into cash? Not turn as in inventory turn, but sell through that investment and realize the cash efficiency from that. And so just review cash margin. Ideally, cash margins between 48 and 54% in your store. Net sales and cost of purchase give you that percentage. Efficiency, net sales divided by total purchases can give you that categorical sell-through, and your target there has got to be 75 to 85. Less than that, you're holding on to too much inventory too long. More than that, you're probably spinning through inventory too fast, and we maybe want to slow down, hold a little more, and capture more market share, i.e. more sales. There's lots of other factors that should be used when we're measuring vendor performance, like the relationship I have with the vendor, their communication or our communication back and forth, their accommodation of requests, reasonable requests, how they are able to accommodate that, on-time delivery, terms, markdown dollars, co-op advertising dollars, whether or not they're growth focused. Now, we take that scorecard and we quantify every single area, giving each measure a number that gives me a total score that makes it very easy for me to compare vendor over vendor. The last thing I'm going to say about vendor scorecards, the one number you're never going to see on my scorecard is annual sales volume. The reason I never include annual sales volume is because this number is dictated by the buying team in your business and is of no relevance to the vendor directly or the vendor performance directly. Too often we're misled by sales volume rather than focusing on the net cash generated as compared to all other vendors in the store.
Interesting. Dan, what's your, can you give us a bit of the timing of these scorecards that, how often should retailers be going through this exercise? What can you offer with that?
Yeah, so good question. Really good question, Rob. You should score your vendor a minimum of 2 times a year. And I say minimum of 2 times because we typically go and meet with a vendor in person or, this year virtually twice a year. And I want to do that homework before I go and sit down with that vendor. And I want, listen, Bob, what a great example at Cloud9. He shares the scorecard with the vendor, a blank copy, and says, please score yourself on all of these areas and send it back. And let's see how we view each other in this. And then you score me on the same things. Yep. Am I doing what I should be doing as a retailer? And this analysis allows us to get bigger, better, and stronger and create better win-win relationships.